Hi everybody, and welcome back. Hope you all enjoyed a great weekend. In this video, I just want to recap where we're at in the course and set the stage for the rest of the videos for the week. So far we've been viewing logic as the study of proper inferences, and inductive logic in particular as a discipline that assesses the quality of inferences based upon their inductive strength, right? On this standard, a good argument is one whose premises render its conclusion probable or likely to be true. We set out two main problems for inductive logic in the first week. First is the problem of constructing a scientific inductive logic, that is the task of setting out a more precise notion of inductive probability, and supplying a method for measuring the inductive probability of arguments, a method that's clear, that's commonsensical, and that's in accord with scientific practice. The second problem was the problem of rationally justifying a system of scientific inductive logic. Right? Why should we employ scientific inductive logic rather than any other sort of inductive logic we might come up with? We looked last week at how formidable these challenges for scientific inductive logic can be. The difficulty of the second problem is the problem of rationally justifying scientific inductive logic was made clear in Hume's traditional problem of induction, which purported to show that regardless of its details, no scientific inductive logic could ever succeed in being rationally justified. While there are sophisticated responses to Hume, and we looked at a few and we could have surveyed others, it's at least widely agreed even among proponents and defenders of these solutions that Hume's problem is a deep one for scientific inductive logic and one that we need to wrestle with. The difficulty of the first problem, that is the problem of constructing a scientific inductive logic, was brought home to us by Nelson Goodman's new problem of induction, or the Grew paradox. Right? This problem showed us that a very natural formal rule for assigning inductive probability to a simple class of arguments, what we had called Rule S, would not work as a starting point for constructing our scientific inductive logic because not everything that can be described linguistically as a regularity is projectable, right? So for example, from the fact that all emeralds observed so far have been Grew, we couldn't conclude that the next emerald we observe will be Grew or that all subsequent emeralds to be observed will be Grew, right? Now, the difficulties of these problems may suggest pessimism regarding the prospects for actually developing a scientific inductive logic, right? That is, a logic that could be on the same sort of footing as our best systems of deductive logic in terms of their rational justification and applicability. In fact, one might at this point be tempted to take up David Hume's own answer to the problem of induction. David Hume did not suggest that we stop assigning inductive probabilities to arguments. For example, he continued inferring that gravity would keep working, that the sun would keep rising, that his pen would keep writing when he tried to write, and so on, even after he proposed his traditional problem of induction. What was his basis for doing so? Well, not in reason, he claimed, but rather in custom or habit. Right? So here is Hume in his treatise on human nature, where he says that custom is the great guide of human life. It is that principle alone which renders our experience useful to us and makes us expect for the future a similar train of events with those which have appeared in the past. Right? Just saying we can't rationally justify our inductive practices, but what we can do is just go with our custom, go with habit. Right? We're sort of instinctually led to think, right? Well, all emeralds I've seen have been green, so therefore the next one will be green. Right? We just go with that. We just go with our intuitive, instinctual patterns of inductive reasoning. Right? That's the proposal, at least, right? And in another passage, right, Hume speaks of this as specifically as instinct, right? He says, "As nature has taught us to the use of our limbs without giving us the knowledge of the muscles and nerves by which they are actuated, so she has implanted in us an instinct which carries forward the thought in a correspondent course to that which she has established among external objects. Though we are ignorant of those powers and forces on which this regular course and succession of objects totally depends." So here's basically saying, like, we're ignorant of the actual workings of the universe that might allow us to, that if they were part of our stock of knowledge, that is, might allow us to make some good, rationally justified inductive arguments. All we have is just sort of a habit that leads us to make certain inferences, an instinct, and that's all we have to go off of, right? So this seems then to suggest a possible psychological solution to Hume's problem of induction, right? Namely, that instinct tells us what's good. And this can also be thought of as a problem, as a solution to the new problem of induction, perhaps too, right? So we have, right, how do we tell between these two arguments which one's good and which one's bad, right? All observed emeralds are green. That's the next emerald observed were green, right? We said intuitively that seems like a good argument versus the argument all observed emeralds are grue. Therefore, the next emerald to be observed will be grue. Intuitively, it's not a good argument. We just go off of that intuition, off of that instinct, right? We instinctually judge certain arguments to be inductively strong and others to be inductively weak, right? Why worry about developing a formal system of scientific inductive logic at all, given the difficulties that we've seen are involved in doing so? Let's just go off our gut, off of our customary or habitual judgments regarding the disparate merits of invalid arguments. The point of this week is going to be to convince us that we should not take this route, right? And the basic thought here would be that humans are prone to a variety of errors and biases when reasoning inductively. That is, when making judgments about the inductive strength of arguments, right? And these are habits we can fairly easily recognize as errors once we reflectively consider them, right? And this indicates that we should not settle for simply basing our judgments of the inductive probability of arguments on instinct alone, with no regard for sort of systematic formal constraints that a scientific inductive logic could supply us if we had one, right? So we'll look at things like the gambler's fallacy, the conjunction fallacy, base rate neglect, overconfidence, confirmation bias, and others, right? So the hope is for this week, by detouring into the psychology of inductive reasoning, we can yield two main rewards, right? We're going to get two things out of this week. First, hopefully this week will motivate us to return to searching for a scientific inductive logic, a formal system of scientific inductive logic, despite the difficulties presented by the old and new problems of induction. And second, by examining some of the fallacies that humans are susceptible to, we might hope to identify those and correct those in our own reasoning, right? And hence come out of this week as better critical thinkers. Right? Now, after this week, we'll then turn to the positive project of constructing a scientific inductive logic, first by just informally looking at some practical rules of thumb for good forecasting, and then more rigorously in the form of probability theory, which will be the subject for the rest of the course. All right, so encourage you to complete the participation poll for this video, and then tune into the next video, which will be on the gambler's fallacy. Also recall that the homework 2, and your initial forecasting probabilities are due by midnight tonight. There's Monday, midnight California time. All right, if you have any questions about those or any of the content of this course, please reach out to me. I'll have my office hours at 11, and you can also feel free to reach out to your TAs. All right, thanks, guys.